Welcome to Creature Guy Live Daily News. Get in the comments and tell me what you think. Now, let's get into the first article of the day. So, from the conversation.com. So, this is a bit of a different situation we have here. Giant kangaroos survived until 6,500 years ago on the New Guinea coast. Wow! And the reason I'm saying that is because most species of prehistoric kangaroos have gone extinct over 50,000 years ago. Some, or like a couple of species, might have survived up to 40,000 years ago over in mainland Australia. And there are certain species that inhabited the Papua New Guinean island that also migrated there from a land bridge connected to mainland Australia. But this is quite astounding. I mean, apart from the other smaller species of modern day macropod or the kangaroos, the wallabies, or even the distant related bandicoots, these animals, for the most part, are thought to have been extinct for tens of thousands of years. So let's take a look and see what's going on. Roughly 50,000 years ago, a kangaroo, unlike any alive today, lived in the mountain forests or rainforests of New Guinea. First discovered by Western science in 1983, Protemnodon tumbuna was roughly the size of a modern red kangaroo, but much more stocky and muscular. Interesting. So it's referring to Protemnodon. I believe this specific genus, at least, has been discovered in different deposits over in Australia. So New Guinea is definitely a new instance, but much more stocky and muscular. Most peculiarly, if hopped little, if at all, it hopped little. It likely did hop to a major extent, considering new analysis of the biomechanics of different species of giant kangaroos, the largest species from Australia. In fact, let's bring him up the Procoptodon, Procop, YTO.
There's not a Y in it.
Oh,
I got it.
I wonder what marsupial I'm thinking of. But Procoptodon itself could weigh probably between 4 to 550 pounds or pushing over 240 kilograms. And this animal did have the ability to hop. So it's one of the species of short faced kangaroo. It is quite odd as to how many species of short faced animals occurred during the Ice Age or the Pleistocene epoch, which is when the giant kangaroos dominated the mainland of Australia. And yes, these are true kangaroos. They're just at this point extinct. They're all members of Macropodidae, which is the same family of marsupials in which modern day kangaroos and wallabies belong to, very closely related to the gray kangaroo and the red kangaroo of today. However, it's for some reason evolved a short face. It's like when looking at the different species of bears over in North and South America or over in the Western Hemisphere. And you have Arctotherium and Arctodus simus, which both had shorter muzzles compared to what you would see in certain other species of bears, like the cave bear, even the brown bear that was evolving, the polar bear, which had longer, elongated snouts.
Wait a minute, I found a funny one.
Even the Agriotherium of early Pleistocene Africa had a longer snout. But referring to the different species, yeah, what on? Okay. I mean, it's definitely showing that short face, but to this female, I'm not sure if she looks threatened or just stunned. Maybe she finally found a water source, considering you would have still have had wet season and dry seasons over in Pleistocene Australia. Though there probably weren't really any major blizzards that occurred in much of the continents, though you do have the in quote Australian Alps. I mean, it is what they're referred to as. So the highest mountain range over in Australia, which today, and in fact, let's actually look up certain pictures of like wallabies or maybe even kangaroos covered in snow in the Australian Alps. Maybe Australian Alps kangaroos. Um, Well, let's see. You might have had certain species of short-faced kangaroos or the larger kangaroos in general covered or had to deal with certain blizzards in those regions. But outside of that, it was just simply a hot and dry ecosystem. but consisting of different species of plants that would have benefited these larger herbivores, considering the largest kangaroo today, or marsupial in Australia, is the red kangaroo, only reaching about 200 pounds or pushing a little over 90 kilograms. So you do have different populations of eastern gray kangaroos, possibly red kangaroos in some instances over in the Australian Alps of, I believe, Victoria, Australia today. So it's one of the few marsupial populations that do come into contact with snow, not including the possum, American possum. Yeah, he looks very, I'd say, proud. He's like, yes, I am the king of Snow Mountain.
Rare wait, Rare Spy VR. What's your favorite dinosaur?
That would be the leader of them all, being T Rex. There really hasn't been a contender for him ever. It was just that, yes, I was annoyed when I saw Spinosaurus aegypticus being portrayed as the ultimate killer. Um, Back in Jurassic Park 3, but it was still quite odd to see and didn't make any sense when you're looking at an animal that has a very thin and narrow snout, also a much thinner neck, even though that specific specimen was portrayed as having quite a robust neck for any species of Spinosaur in general. Compared to a T-Rex, even a T-Rex much smaller than that Spinosaurus, like in the instance, would likely take him down. There's only so much the arms would provide in defense. It would almost be like not including like the mouth or the teeth, but a T-Rex fighting or a Tarbosaurus fighting a Dinohyrus, which is the massively armed semi-aquatic ornithomimid theropod that coexisted with Tarbosaurus, which probably had a tough time with that animal too. But besides that, yes, it is T-Rex. I do like different species such as Giganotosaurus. Let's see who else. You could stick like Allosaurus fragilis or Allosaurus annex into there. Oh yeah, but focusing on the what on earth is going on here? He's got a very human personality. It's like, whoa, hey, can I get a little privacy? I'm just trying to release my bladder. He's even like showing it, like I gotta go. When you gotta go, you gotta go. But yeah, besides that, wow, wow, wait, hold on a second. Wait a second.
I think it's real.
Yeah, might be. Looks like it's in somebody's pasture. I'm not sure. It's like, um, hmm, like they're not covered in enough snow. I would think they would be blanketed to a certain extent. I mean, they could always shake it off.
Okay. Effort S. Jack said, "Is it true that kangaroos are the only ones that get massive, or do gray ones get just as big?"
Okay, so I think yeah, you're asking if red kangaroos specifically are the largest. That is true with the reds. Eastern gray kangaroos still can reach somewhere around 120 to 130 pounds, or pushing some around 50 to 60 kilograms.
How large do the red ones get?
They can get to about 200 pounds or a little over 90 kilograms. That is much smaller compared to even certain elongated or longer and narrow faced kangaroos, ground dwelling kangaroos specifically of the Pleistocene. It wasn't just Procoptodon. You had other species. Even Protemnodon, I believe, could reach somewhere around 2 to 300 pounds. That would be pushing it for the upper limit, or somewhere around 100 to maybe 180 kilograms. No, wait a second. 140 kilograms. Well, let's see who else. Yeah, well, if that's an actual picture, wow, that is very deep. I knew it snowed in the Australian Alps, but this is quite an extent. In fact, I think it was recently that Australia had a bit of a cold front. Oh, also New Zealand apparently got a massive Antarctic front. I'm not sure exactly what caused that to occur, but there aren't any kangaroos, at least necessarily wild populations native to New Zealand. They're considering you have like different released wild populations of red deer, moose over in New Zealand. It's possible you could have kangaroos running around as well, or hopping, I should say. They're not capable of technically running. Um, But it is interesting when looking at the older Ice Age species of kangaroos, in many cases, especially the ground dwelling species, because there were also ancient Pleistocene species of tree kangaroos. But the ground dwelling kangaroos were likely feeding on slightly more nutritious species of grasses compared to the different species of wallabies and red and eastern grays of today, or even the wallaroos, which is another species of kangaroo. Um, but it's a bit of a question as to why specifically all of a sudden you had this massive change in ecology within Australia, also including Papua New Guinea, because even though tree kangaroos survived, they became much smaller morphs. So, when once probably reaching over 100 pounds or pushing well over 45 kilograms, now they're weighing in at maybe 20 to maybe 30 pounds. It's a pretty large tree kangaroo, especially if you're talking about like the Mashi tree kangaroo. And they're all herbivores, but tree kangaroos are mostly feeding on different species of leaves. They rarely venture down to feed on different species of grasses or shrubs. They still will venture down to the bottom, especially when obtaining like extra water or possibly like even to defecate or urinate. It's different, of course, from the sloths over in South America, and definitely even compared to the ground sloths of Ice Age South America. But tree sloths have such a poor nutrition feeding behavior that they only venture down to urinate or defecate about once a week. Koalas, despite being renowned as having a very poor nutrition balance as well, they have much more energy compared to the sloths, especially during the rut. It's very noticeable. It sounds like there are certain like species of monkey up in the trees. In reality, they're just simply koalas trying to intimidate each other.
Okay, Effort Jacks said, "One more question. Who's the main rival of the kangaroo in the wild now that the Tasmanian tiger is gone?"
Well, the thylacine was probably a bit of a mix when it came to uh, being the top predator of kangaroos, but it's been the dingo for at least 3,500 years. Before the dingo, though, or what I mean by that is, I guess you could say for the past, not including people or like the Aborigines, I'd say the past 40,000 years, that's been a mysterious question because the dingo didn't arrive until what, the Bronze Age. And beforehand, it's a bit of a question. Well, okay, I guess you had the thylacine, the Tasmanian devil over on mainland Australia. So possibly, at least for that time, it was the thylacine and the saltwater crocodile. That's definitely a main predator of the kangaroo. Okay, it would be the saltwater crocodile besides the thylacine and the dingo. A bit of a question as to how long saltwater crocodiles, however, have been in Australia, and not just Australia. The waters adjacent to Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, they're over adjacent to Thailand, Malaysia, and even eastern India. And we even had populations occurring adjacent to the islands, adjacent to the island of Madagascar, off of East Africa. But that was also, I believe, a few thousand years back. But um, I thought I just mentioned that geographical area. I just think it's really neat of the saltwater crocodiles. Also, the small islands I'm talking about adjacent to Madagascar were home to the dodo, which, not including people, it's a bit of a mystery as to whether or not there are any predators that hunted those specific animals. And they seem to have fed on different species of fruits and seeds. They seem to have had a very good sense of smell, despite always being portrayed as these unintelligent, slow um, birds. They were very efficient, or I guess specialized in the small ecosystems of the islands that they inhabited. So for the time that they existed, dodos did pretty well. But yeah, it would be the salties and the dingoes. Beforehand, if you travel back 40 to 50,000 years into the Pleistocene, you would have had different species of like beaver-toothed marsupials that would have hunted the different species of very close relatives of modern day kangaroos, but also including the tree kangaroos of that time, the larger species of koalas, the elongated, narrow faced kangaroos, as well as the short faced kangaroos, such as the Myrlacaleo, the Thylacaleo marsupial lions. They weren't actually lions. It's just due to their overall build that they're nicknamed that specific term. But in reality, they're not closely related to the modern lions. They're actually, or like Eurasian cave lions, the American lion. They're actually more closely related to the saber-toothed Thylacosmilids of South America, and even the Nimravids, such as Barbarophilis, or what Diego is from Ice Age. Who else? Oh, and then you had the giant lizards, such as Megalania, which were probably reaching somewhere around 20 feet in length. They're pushing 6 meters. And in some cases, could probably reach well over 1,000 to 1,300 pounds, possibly even heavier, or a little over 500 kilograms. I'm There were probably certain other predators, but it might have been further back in time. We don't have any evidence of different species of saber-toothed creatures inhabiting Australia at that point. Or really, it seems ever, unless there were certain species of Gorgonopsians back. I'm referring to proto mammals that existed over 256 million years ago, so before even the dinosaurs evolved. But I don't know if any that existed over in Australia. They tend to be found in different parts of Africa, South America, North America. Um, but those were the supreme predators. Oh, that's there were certain others, possibly the Hots eagle, certain other species of airborne birds at that point. In fact, even today, occasionally, there are certain birds in Australia that might go after at least younger kangaroos, but probably not sticking to the adults. See, the adults could possibly just kill them, not just with a kick, but even just clawing them to death, considering red kangaroos have very robust claws compared to their hand size. And yeah, despite the violence I'm portraying of kangaroos, but it is a necessity for these animals. They're mostly feeding on different species of grasses. Kangaroos do not have teeth that are suitable for feeding on different species of shrubs or bushes. And it seems to be the same with the different species of prehistoric kangaroos, prehistoric wallabies, however, and the diprotodontids. So let's bring him up, the diprotodon, the giant wombats. Diproto. They were likely feeding on different species of shrubs, but however, like with what you see in different species of wombats today, which have a bit of a distinct but similar type of tooth arrangement to the rhino-sized wombats, um, or diprotodontids of the Ice Age, they were also likely feeding on different species of probably roots. Oh, yeah, this is probably one facing off a smaller two Megalania. It's giving the Megalania a type of Komodo dragon sort of a behavior. So, which is possible. We don't really have any evidence for massive coalitions of at least fossilized specimens of Megalania. It certainly is possible, kind of like with what we see in Komodo dragons on the island of Komodo, north of Australia, where they will gang up on a certain bitten wild boar individual or maybe even ox. Oh, well, yeah, this could definitely occur. You usually see representations where the Megalania is either chasing the animal or he's always winning, which is interesting. I think it's when you look at certain documentaries and it's usually the herbivore that wins in this case. And in many drawings, they tend to have it where, well, on the majority end, or at least slightly larger percentage, it's the carnivore that's winning. But yeah, this is really rare to see with a some diprotodontid species. You had species diprotodonts or larger wombats that were probably around the 500 to 800 pound range. The largest species today barely reaches somewhere around 80 to 90 pounds or a little over 40 kilograms.
This guy looks like a pet.
Yeah, he does. And yes, what you're seeing there, she actually, that's a she. Um, she looks quite concerned, but maybe she's supposed to be giving birth. No, wait a second.
No.
She's a marsupial, so it's slowly growing up in her pouch. Um, well, wombats have their
And that's a big
pouches.
head.
Yeah, they have their pouches specifically faced towards the rear or behind the animal, and this prevents dirt from hitting the youngster, especially when she's digging with her forepaws. Okay, so yeah, this is not a bad snapshot, though. Everybody's a little too close together, but you can see this with different representations of different parts of the Cenozoic era, even back into the Mesozoic or the Proterozoic era. But yeah, it has it where actually the thylacine. Speaking of this animal, it has been around for over 1.8 million years, probably even further back into the Pleistocene, and it's a bit of a question as to why it was so successful. And it is more closely related to different species of kangaroos. The koalas, compared to any other type of um, lineage of animal today. Actually, no, let me rephrase that. That's not exactly correct. It's more closely related to Tasmanian devils. They're all marsupials, but it's a bit more distantly related to the macropodids or the diprotodontids. So this is a really good reconstruction of a skeleton of a diprotodon. So this animal could probably weigh in at 3 to 4 tons, making it the largest species of marsupial to exist. This was virtually the giant ground sloth of Australia. However, it was probably a bit quicker. These animals likely had the ability to run somewhat like modern day rhinos, but they probably weren't galloping. So it was a bit of like a quick trot, but not as graceful as maybe what you see in a horse or even certain rhinos in general. And I mean, it's not exactly bad to compare rhinos with horses, zebras, considering all three are members of the parasodactyl lineage of placental mammals. So they're also more closely related to tapirs. I think this is from Prehistoric Planet. They had some weird protodontid reconstructions. I thought they were kind of hideous, and they were just endlessly trekking in search of water. I think they finally came upon. They depicted them as coming upon some vegetation, but yeah, a little too arid. With creatures as large as the marsupials were back in Ice Age Australia, you would have needed continuous areas of vegetation. And technically, even for modern day marsupials, historically, you would have had quite vast grasslands, even over in like the Northern Territory, Central Australia. It's just due to overgrazing in some instance, well, a lot of instances, not just by maybe livestock or non-continued rotated grazing of livestock, where it's just moving like every couple of or maybe 3 to 4 days from one large pasture to another. But even the overgrazing of non-native species of animals, such as like rabbits that were introduced to Australia in like the 1880s or 1890s, like a handful for hunting, and then they just exploded. Also, different species of rodents like rats and mice. There's, I think, another instance where the kangaroos, technically with red eastern grays, you have it where one of the species is over 30 million, and there's only around like maybe 40 to 50,000 dingoes, and there's only so much of an effect that they can have on the kangaroos, especially if they're feeding on other species of animals in general. What was I mentioning that? Oh, yeah, I was mentioning that they made it kind of a barren landscape. Yeah, I mean, these is oh, good reconstructions. What's with this guy? He looks like a bit of a tapir mixed with a Sumatran rhino or a greater one horn rhino to an extent. Yeah, they're giving him that type of look. But besides that, I would say the diprotodontids in many instances look like something you could just go over and pet, much like a bit of a captive wombat. So you could probably ride these animals. Oh, yeah, that's a good, specimen of a skull. Yeah, we do have a number of different diprotodontid skulls that have been recovered from Pleistocene Australia. I know I've only mentioned that they existed about 40 to 50,000 years ago. That was at the very end of their reign. You could find these animals well over 2 million years ago back in Pleistocene Australia. I don't believe the diprotodontids were really inhabiting Papua New Guinea, however. It seems to be that they evolved and were pretty much restricted to mainland Australia, possibly inhabiting New Zealand. Yeah, I always found this wombat reconstruction a bit um frowning, like he's just unhappy about something. Like he wasn't able to get some nutritious grasses, or I'm not sure, he missed the rut. I think maybe that was like a marsupial line it was depicting. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good reconstruction.
He just looks funny.
Yeah, oh, yeah, he looks quite curious. It is interesting. They do have a very large nose compared to their body size. When looking at the skull, it's very possible that there simply was a very large nasal area. Though there might have been certain guesses as to maybe there being a bit of a dome, kind of like with what you see in certain horned dinosaurs like Pachyrhinosaurus, but seems to be more of just a large nasal area. At least that's the theory. Yeah, it's very likely that the kangaroos in general, like Procoptodon, which could reach somewhere around 8 to 9 feet in height, or pushing somewhere around 2.7 to 2.8 meters, and likely had a very similar parenting lifestyle and also growing stages like today's kangaroos. They were just feeding on slightly more nutritious species of vegetation. Also, likely due to the difference in climate. They probably also had shorter ears compared to their body size because maybe it was just slightly cooler. However, you have those different populations over in the Alps of Australia, and their ears are not much shorter than the different populations further north in much hotter regions. Um, oh, well, let's head back to the article. Uh, it moved mostly, so referring to Protemnodon tabuna, moved mostly on all fours with long, strong forelimbs, providing support for agile bounding through complex and steep terrain. Oh, I never finished my explanation. It mentioned that it probably hopped very little. It seems by recent analysis of Procoptodon specifically, the largest species of not tree kangaroo, ground dwelling kangaroo, these animals could hop very efficiently and for probably long distances as well, much like today's kangaroos. So, yes, this animal could hop. There was a huge debate, I think, for decades, questioning whether or not ground dwelling ice age kangaroos had the ability to efficiently hop. And it seems to be that they very well could. This strange animal was one of many megafauna that once roamed Australia and New Guinea. Is thought to have gone extinct some 20,000 to 50,000 years ago. However, our new study published in the journal NPJ Biodiversity suggests Protemnodon timbuna survived until as late as 6,000 years ago in northern New Guinea. This constitutes solid evidence the Australian and New Guinean megafauna did not all go extinct at the same time, but that some hung on for much longer than others. I mean, yeah, that definitely changes the situation with the megafauna. This technically means that, well, megafauna, it's usually referred to the different species or groups of animals that lived during the Ice Age or the Pleistocene epoch. It can also be referred to much further back into the Cenozoic. Rarely, but it can still occur. Sometimes it's used for different lineages of dinosaurs. But when focusing on the Ice Age animals of Australia, this means that, or at least, um, with Protemnodon, which could weigh more than 250 pounds, was still roaming Australia like back in the Mesolithic period. So this is very shocking to hear. We really like thought that it was just a massive farewell by 40,000 years ago. This constitutes solid evidence the Australian and New Guinean I already said that. Yeah, I think I'm down to the next paragraph, if there is one. Oh, good. All 7 Protemnodon species had gone extinct in Australia by 41,000 years ago, along with nearly all other megafauna species. Okay, so it wasn't Just me. There are several species of Protemnodon, so I wonder if it's a much smaller species. I would have to take a look into that. That's my guess because the ecology of the landscape 6,000 years ago in Australia, you had massive drying events that were occurring, not just over on this continent, but even North America, Europe were experiencing massive changes over in Asia. But technically, those massive changes already occurred back in like the Younger Dryas event or slightly after the end of the Ice Age, like between 9,000 11,000 years ago with like certain drier instances or wetter occurrences, like over in different parts of Canada. You had it where the mammoth steppe pretty much dominated the landscape, which was a very somewhat semi-arid grassland, but still bountiful with very high nutrient dense grasses. Not really any trees on the landscape. The soils were not suited for trees, and then all of a sudden, due to the drastic climatic changes, you had moist, wet tundra come over and dominate quite a percentage of that area. Let's see. There's something else I was trying to get at with this. It might hit me later. Whether the final extinctions in this process were driven primarily by climate change or human overhunting remains heavily debated. The only time I can see maybe, human hunting having an impact is that there were barely any of the individuals left, and there simply wasn't really anything else to hunt, and then the animal would just simply gone extinct. But I think a lot of times when people are thrown into a situation for species extinction, it's just usually to blame it, like, specifically on the humans and nothing else is taken into account. So, I really don't think it has to do with people at all. Likely just the climatic changes, ecological changes, because it wouldn't have taken very long to starve out these animals when all of a sudden their major food sources are gone. There's nothing, there's very little for them to eat. But in New Guinea, the evidence is mounting towards a rather different story. At the Nome, that's funny, or Nome Bay, a rock shelter in the highlands of eastern Papua New Guinea, fossils of Protemnodon tubuna show it lived locally until 22,000 to 27,000 years ago during the last ice age. That's still much later than many species of ice age marsupial in Australia. More evidence of late surviving Protemnodon tumuna in New Guinea came in 2024 with the discovery of a single tooth from Lachitu Cave located in the foothills of the Unake Range on the northwest coast of Papua New Guinea. What is also interesting is that if you're over in northeast northern Papua New Guinea today, you have different species of tree kangaroo. In fact, maybe we should bring them up. The Mashu's tree kangaroo. Um, Okay, so I think Maitchu. Um, that's my guess. Just tree kangaroo. You should like look red and yellow with certain stripes. Oh, yeah. So you also like will find certain. I think there's at least 8 to 10 different species of tree kangaroo over in Papua New Guinea, and then you have two species over in northeastern Australia, being the Bennett's tree kangaroo and the Lumholtz tree kangaroo, which occupy a very small sliver on the horn of the continent. And so this is the Mashu's tree kangaroo. It's not too large, but not are really the other species today. Maybe pushing around 20 to 23 pounds or a little over 10 kilograms at most. And they are also herbivores, so they feed on different species of fruit, but usually feeding on a wide variety of different species of leaves. I think that's just a captive one, so
They
it's
all
just
seem to be
feeding.
captive.
Yeah, tree kangaroos are really hard to come upon over in the wilds of Papua New Guinea. They're very elusive, very shy, very introverted. So, coming upon one is just very challenging. Usually, it's just sometimes different trail cameras, or at least bits of footage or snapshots. Yeah, it seems to be a healthy individual. That could be a wild one. Okay, well, This one just seems to be, a mother and her happy youngster. In fact, they both seem pretty relaxed. Oh yeah, here he is. This is a very happy fellow. He seems quite cheerful. I don't know specifically how long the Mashu's tree kangaroo has been over in Papua New Guinea, possibly since the last ice age. You did have a wide variety of much larger tree kangaroos inhabiting the region over 1.2 million years ago. So the marsupials are not necessarily a newcomer to the island. And they probably were on adjacent islands as well, considering due to the lower level of sea levels during the ice age, probably just had a lot more forest available. Yeah, he looks a little shocked. Yeah, they do have quite long claws too, like the different species of ground dwelling kangaroos, but they are claws also used to efficiently hang on to different types of bark. Considering you have different species of trees over in Papua New Guinea compared to the forests of northeastern or eastern Australia in general. So they are differently shaped and having a different texture or I guess sharpness compared to like koala hands or claws, for instance. They are quite a bit off in the family tree compared to koalas, despite both these animals being a marsupials, being arboreal, and sharing a lot of similar, um, I guess, behavioral characteristics. They are quite different. This looks like he kind of looks sunburnt, but no, it's just his fur coloration. He looks, pretty cheerful. These are like the quokkas of Papua New Guinea. They're just smiling fellas, and it's like
These
but
are fun to pull.
the nice thing is that I guess you can, see these guys in a variety of forms.
Peekaboos.
And yeah, they just look very cheerful and relaxed, whereas the quokkas, you have to be in that specific state where they're just feeding on a leaf. Yeah, these guys are just overall curious. It is interesting. You could say in some cases they might have a certain resemblance to lagomorphs, so like the different species of viscacha over in the mountains of Argentina or Peru.
Oh, they caught one.
Oh, whoa. I guess yeah, they're probably tagging it, or maybe they're releasing it. Possibly, it could be. It's a huge mystery as to the estimate of the populations of these animals because of how elusive they are and how little research has been done on these different species, really to all of the tree kangaroos over in Papua New Guinea in general. That really goes for most of the animals on the island too. Well, yeah, these guys, yeah, very positive fellas, especially yeah him and them too. Yeah, I guess all of these, yeah, cheerful. It's hard to really imagine that they're actually somewhat competitors with other species of tree kangaroos. So the tooth had come from a limestone deposit dated 18,000 years old or younger, although it's unclear whether the tooth itself was also that recent. In 2004, archaeological excavations at Teora, a rock shelter just west of Lachitu, produced a large collection of well preserved animal remains. After maximum sea levels receded 6,800 years ago, Teora was used intensely by people exploiting nearby marine and rainforest resources. Over the next 1,500 years, they rapidly built up a dense deposit of discarded bones and shells, and hundreds of small bone points that likely tipped fishing spears or arrows. Okay, where's the kangaroo? While examining this rich collection to understand how ancient people had lived in the dense coastal rainforest, one bone stood out to us. It was from the finger of a macropodid, a member of the kangaroo family, but one much larger than any species of marsupial found in New Guinea today. Suspecting it represented an unrecorded species, we compared this specimen's shape and size to as many extant and extinct macropodids as possible to determine which one it likely belonged to. So, when it comes to how many prehistoric kangaroos were existing over in Papua New Guinea and Australia as a whole during the Ice Age, there have probably been over 40 different species of prehistoric kangaroos that have been discovered, and that's not including the different species of diprotodontids or wombats that existed on both islands as well. We could even call it one major island. Um, there's also this weird kangaroo back here. I'm not exactly sure who he is. Some jumbo. Um, and then there's these relatives of like numbats, but they could also be like earlier relatives of modern day wallaby species. And yeah, it's some I think tree kangaroo over here. Can't see him. Or was I also getting at with this? Oh yeah, I think we have found certain prehistoric species of numbats, but I believe even the modern numbat was quite existent throughout the Ice Age as well. So over 200,000 years ago. So it is interesting. Australia was quite lush with larger animals back over 80,000 years ago. So the Taurus fossil is clearly different to all currently living macropodids. It's most similar to members of Protemnodon, specifically the New Guinean species Protemnodon otibandus. The species is thought to be the ancestor of Protemnodon tubuna, for which no fossils of the finger bones are known. Oh, that's interesting. So the fossil has some unique traits that distinguish it from other Potemnodon species, including very prominent projections above the area where this middle finger bone joins to the claw. But on the whole, it closely resembles many species in the genus. And since we know Protemnodon tabuna was present in the local area a few kilometers away, perhaps as recently as 18,000 years ago, the fossil from Teora most likely belongs to it. That's still very recent to have existed over in Papua New Guinea, even though it is mentioning the 6,000 year mark at one point. That's still quite astonishing. So that's about, I think, maybe 7,000 years before the Ice Age ended, even though you still had certain species of Ice Age animals um, in different parts of the world after that. There's some instances where, like, maybe even the giant wombats might have persisted a bit longer, the diprotodontids. Read together with the existing evidence from Nombe and Lachitu. The Teora fossil shows people must have coexisted with some species of megafauna for tens of thousands of years. Um, okay, it's just talking about the people now. Let me see if there's anything else. On the north coast of New Guinea, both factors were likely at play. It's talking about climate change and human hunting. Well, I mean, ice age climate change. Studies of Protemnodon teeth from Mount Etna in central eastern Queensland have found these kangaroos had small home ranges. That's another interesting thing when it comes to the giant kangaroos. But I think it's also based on certain species today, really the different species of tree kangaroo, that they don't have very large home ranges. It's quite interesting. Like in some cases, less than 1 to 2 square miles. But if you think about in a forest, that's quite a bit of area to jump around. Or what is that? Pushing like over 3 square kilometers. And some of these tree kangaroos, but really thinking of tree kangaroos today, have the ability to jump over 30 feet down from one branch to another, or pushing over 9 meters. That's huge for an animal. It's barely 4 feet in length, or 1.3 meters. Okay, so they didn't move far in order to forage or migrate, a tendency that would leave them extremely vulnerable to habitat loss. Yeah, that is the problem with creatures like this, is that once there's like a major change to their ecosystem, there's nothing that they can really do. But that would be the same case for the larger species that still would have migrated. You're still eradicating their food source. There's not really anywhere they can move to. Drying climates over the past few 100,000 years steadily shrank their highland rainforest habitat in New Guinea. Okay, the major climatic events that really affected them were pretty quick and immediate compared to hundreds of thousands of years. They were fine during those times. Not much was occurring. Let's see, and stimulated the rapid growth of nearby human populations. Ew, huh? Oh. Eventually, the habitat became so small it couldn't support a viable population of these ancient kangaroos. Yeah, like within the last maybe few hundred years of their reign, if that. Trapped and unable to reach their increasingly distant home. Okay, it's just mentioning hunting. I think that's it. Yeah, it's likely it was just really climatic and ecological change that took out the giant marsupials, unfortunately. But it is quite shocking that this animal was still around at least 6,500 years ago during the Mesolithic. Okay. Let's head to. Oh, you know what? We're going to give everyone a minute to put any comments into the chat about what you think about these Ice Age marsupials. Okay, we're back. Let's hit into the next part of the Ice Age. Maybe. Yeah. From News. So, a study. Male woolly mammoths more often fell into natural traps. Well, I'm wondering what's occurring here by natural traps, but also how they were able to distinguish it. An international team of researchers led by the Swedish Museum of Natural History has discovered that fossilized remains of woolly mammoths, Mammuthus primigenius, more often came from males than females, 69% versus 31%. It is interesting when it comes to the woolly mammoth. It was one of the first prehistoric animals to have had intense analysis done on it. It's like before different species of dinosaurs and most other prehistoric mammals in general. So the scientists speculate that this skewed ratio exists in the fossil record because inexperienced male mammoths more often traveled alone and got themselves killed by falling into natural traps that made their preservation more likely. It is interesting. It's mentioned this with like different other lineages of proboscideans, which is generally the overall elephant family. It spans back into the Eocene epoch over 54 million years ago. But it's yeah, making out like they're not very intelligent and they would just walk into anything. You look at a wide variety of bull elephants today, it can still depend on the individual. But certain even bachelor herds, they're quite cautious in where they travel. Like there's this instance over in what Zambia or Zimbabwe. Oh gosh, where is it? I think it might be Zambia. Can we look up elephants crossing like rapids over in Zambia? And I would guess that certain cases mammoths were doing the same thing, but they actually like the bulls are judging like where specifically the water or the current is much stronger because there can be an instance where they can't handle it.
You say Zambia?
I think so. Zambia. I think it might be the Zambezi River they're traveling. There are like these small bits of islands in between. No, it's another river ecosystem. I've seen this before, but I don't think that's it. It's also like during the wet season. I'm thinking of this might be it. He's definitely in a much. I think it could be a female. Much more relaxed area. Yeah, okay. This seems to be it. It seems calm, but this is actually quite a fast flowing current. And there also comes to a point where there's a major drop off from a waterfall. This might be somewhere else, but it could be a herd of females with their young traveling. You might have had similar instances with mammoths or woolly mammoths crossing rivers, even like Columbian mammoths in different parts of North America.
I think Akita Bear's running behind. Akita Bear said, "Kangaroos. I always thought they know how to box or boxing for defense."
Sort of. Wasn't it was kind of worse than boxing. It was more of like clawed bare knuckle fighting. But yeah, they could definitely um gouge each other's eye outs pretty easily. And like even other predators that preyed upon them, like the different marsupial lions. I thought like a Leo. Um, but I guess you could even have it where different herds of mastodons would be crossing rivers similar to this, but it was mentioning that the bulls are more likely to get themselves into these traps. Now, you could have it because the females are so concerned about not getting their youngsters into certain types of traps or maybe even sinkholes, whereas the bulls in some cases might be less cautious. It also could depend on how that bull was raised. So you might have also have had it where certain populations of mammoths, like similar to elephants, are just naturally a bit more cautious than others. You could have had it where the climates might have had a bit of an impact in helping promote that cautiousness. But it is interesting considering of how hot of a climate it is over in Africa, and yet the elephants are some of the most cautious creatures within these different ecosystems. They're also creating a lot of heat too, so you would assume that this heat would be causing a lot of stress, and they would just panic, and they couldn't handle like a sort of like major problem solving. Instead, they kind of just stand by, maybe munch on some grass for a little bit, and think like a philosopher, like, I think I should take this area or this route over here. Um, because of like changes in the wind or specifically like how the water's flowing. And it would have been very similar with the mammoths or mastodons. Probably even the earlier Gomphotheres as well. But this occurs in many river systems, not just in like Zimbabwe or Zambia, but over in Mozambique. Not so much in like South Africa because it tends to be a lot drier until that is like recent flood events like that occurred earlier this year. There was like a certain footage over in Kruger National Park where there was flooding and a female was having to quickly get her like newborn calf across the river. And yeah, they made it.
This just looks like they're swimming.
Yeah, it seems to be a much calmer area, almost like a
Wait,
marsh to
am
an
I seeing
extent.
hippos?
You could be. Yeah, it's a hippo. Um, yeah, at least the calves have to be careful, but because you
Do
can have
hippos
it where
attack them?
they do occasionally, but usually if it's right next to a herd, obviously the females will come over and chase it, or the older adolescent male elephants will think, "Oh, look, something we can chase," and they'll go after the hippo. Yeah, it's funny. There's not usually like mm, any fatalities. At least between the elephants and the hippos, it can occur, however. It might have been a sort of instance with certain straight tusked elephants and hippos back in Europe when there was a point where hippos made it into southern Europe during the Ice Age. So you could have had conflict between those two species, and it was pretty much the hippopotamus species of today. Not really different, besides maybe something to do with those specific populations further north, and maybe they were just slightly furrier. Let's see. I guess let's head back to the woolly mammoths. Trying to think of I guess what might have been slightly more common for mammoths is also maybe not crossing necessarily um as consistently fast flowing rivers, but also frozen lakes, frozen rivers in many cases. So also testing the ice. Kind of like what bears or even some cases moose do today. Slipping, I would guess, would not be as big of a problem, but elephants still slip today. There have been certain instances where they're adjacent to like artificial watering holes to help get them through the dry season, And yeah, there's sometimes when they slip, but they're okay. I mean, you would be concerned that an animal weighing 7.5 tons and all of a sudden slips and the whole body breaks, but they're actually quite robust. It's just if the whole animal happens to drop a foot, then with um like all four legs, then yeah, it could break its legs on impact. I think my guess is that if this animal is crossing like a frozen lake or river, is it's going to be able to get back up considering you have it where moose and just other species of deer have trouble, but their small toes make it a lot more complicated. So maybe the mammoths it was slightly easier. Still, they do not necessarily have very grappling feet. Most bones, tusks, and teeth from mammoths and other Ice Age animals haven't survived, said senior author Dr. Love Dallin from the Swedish Museum of Natural History. It is highly likely that the remains that are found in Siberia these days have been preserved because they have been buried and thus protected from weathering. I believe from Siberia alone, we have found over 76 specimens of woolly mammoths. They're found in other different, in fact, most of the northern hemisphere has discovered um, instances or specimens of woolly mammoths, like all over much of Europe, Asia, and into North America. Much of Alaska and Canada has discovered different specimens of woolly mammoths, and even including New England of the United States, possibly Washington State. So our findings imply that male mammoths more often died in a way. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, that meant their remains were buried, perhaps by falling through lake ice in winter. Oh, or getting stuck in bogs. Bogs. Oh, yeah. Oh, so it's not necessarily too surprising. It is unfortunate. For the study, Dr. Dallin and colleagues generated genomic data from 98 bone. I think 98 bones, tooth, and bone, tooth, and tusk samples collected at various locations throughout Siberia. I would say that trying to figure out which frozen lake or river is suitable to hold, in this case, a 7 to 9 ton animal can be a bit more complicated than having to judge like how fast a certain current is of a flowing river because you can just walk right into it, or its trunk can test the current. With that, it's much harder. And then, yeah, there's the bog issue. Okay. Let's bring up the Eurasian cave lion, or what is it, Panthera spilius? Eurasia.
Wait, you said Panthera spilius, didn't you?
Oh, right. Okay. So yeah, Panthera, and then separate word, SPE. Oh, it popped up. Oh, this is an interesting drawing. It's definitely giving it a almost slimmer sort of a lion depiction, but it's very close related to the African lion. This one's actually giving it a slight mane. I mean, it's certainly possible you might have had a certain additional bit of fur or fluff around the neck or like even part of the cheeks, like with what you see in certain subspecies of, well, pretty much all subspecies of tigers today. But there doesn't seem to be really any evidence when looking at the neck structure, like the cervical vertebrae, even the back of the skull of the animal, that the Eurasian cave lion, despite living in a much cooler climate compared to the different populations of African lions or Panthera leo, which historically, like back into the early 1900s, the 1800s, would have covered much of Western Asia and even Central Asia, like as far west as India which you have like the lions over in the Gir forest of today. Also, Panthera spelaeus is very close in size to the African lion. They're probably around the same size. Maybe the African lion is slightly larger, but not by too much. Panthera spelaeus is reaching maybe 6 to 700 pounds, or a little over 300 kilograms. Wow, this is an older reconstruction. Um, Definitely a lot more fur on the neck. Almost looks like a. Um, it's a certain cat from Asia. Maybe it's the fishing cat. I'm thinking the fat fishing cats.
Wait, did I put this guy up?
Yeah, I think it was the second one. It's not a bad reconstruction. It's very possible they might have had a fur color, though we do have preserved fur of the cave lion. Yeah, he's a bit fluffy. He likely did coexist with different packs of wolves. Great wolves have been around for over 200,000 years. Cave lion seems to have popped up well over a million years ago. There is also the American lion over in North America, but it's a bit more distantly related. Also, it doesn't seem, at least at the moment, that we have evidence for the American lion coming in contact with the cave lion. But it is possible, maybe at its southern range over in North America, that the saber-toothed cat Smilodon fatalis might have come into contact with it, considering back in 2020, we found evidence from southern Alberta, Canada, that there were Smilodon fatalis inhabiting the region. Even part of the skull was found of a certain specimen. This might be, I think, of the cub that was found recently over in Siberia. Was it Siberia or the Yukon?
I'm trying to figure
Um,
out where I just got that. There it is.
I think it was somewhere around 30 to 40,000 years old, so late Pleistocene, right after the Ice Age Australian marsupials went extinct. Yeah, there's his face. He was quite young, I think within a few weeks, maybe. And then, yeah, I'm guessing maybe froze to death. It was one of the coldest times around 30,000 years ago during the whole Pleistocene epoch. So that's why you had different populations of possibly even woolly mammoths going extinct in some instances, even like different woolly rhinos, and the predators were even having a hard time. But it's also a cub. So it's just naturally, it's going to be much harder to stay warm.
That's the whole body.
Yeah, it is pretty small. There does seem to be evidence because of its name for Panthera spelaeus to have utilized different cave systems, especially over in Europe.
Okay, here's how small it was. It's a person's hand next.
Yeah, I mean, it's like certain lion cubs today, like pushing over what, maybe a month old. Could be slightly younger. Trying to think of the amount of time like mothers or lionesses will keep their cubs away from the main pride before introducing them. This could be a realistic snapshot. They did have to deal with packs of gray wolves, even cave hyenas in different instances, um, possibly bears or even other lions at certain points. In fact, well, um, Europe, Asia had more than just these specific species. You had the Eurasian jaguars, the Eurasian cougars. There's somebody else. I want to bring up Acinonyx pleisticanus. Acinonyx. And then, separate word. Oh, popped up. Hmm.
Wait. What's the second one?
Pleistoconus.
No, I got Paradonesis.
Yeah, I think he's smaller. Um, okay, so Pleist. Oh, well, there we go. This was a species of cat that was approaching the size of certain subspecies of tigers, or I guess slightly smaller subpopulations of lions today. It was a cheetah. This cheetah could reach somewhere between 4 to possibly, well, I think it's pushing, but 4 to 400 to 450 pounds or pushing over 200 kilograms. This was a massive behemoth for the cheetah lineage.
Wonder if it was actually fast.
Um, yeah, it could probably reach some around 30 to 40 miles per hour or pushing what, over 55 kilometers.
This is funny.
They might be chasing away a smaller Homotherium in this
I'm
instance.
just thinking of the Lion King.
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess they're giving that bit of a cheetah or not cheetah, hyena sort of
But the 3 of them staring.
yeah, look. What is it? Oh, so yeah, these animals were likely hunting because I think many may be envisioning Africa in this instance, but it really, when it comes to, oh yeah, these are cave hyenas. Even though, well, technically, it's just seems to be a larger subpopulation or subspecies of Crocuta crocuta, so like the spotted hyena of today over in Africa. But they except the Achinonyx pleistoconus or the this Eurasian cheetah could put up a fight with these hyenas, unlike cheetahs of today, which can scare off a hyena in some cases, but they can't fight them. Considering cheetahs today don't really reach much more than maybe 152 pounds or pushing a little over 70 kilograms. But um, the Achinonyx pleistoconus was likely hunting different species of deer. Um, I think this is the Cynomygosaurus, but I believe Cynomygosaurus had much larger and broader antlers. This is another closely related species of deer that probably weighed somewhere around 1,000 pounds or pushing a little over 470 kilograms, around the size of a modern day Rocky Mountain elk. Yeah, Pleistoconus or Echinonyx plasticonus seems to have inhabited, for the most part, different parts of China and Mongolia during the Ice Age. It does seem that it could have roamed into different parts of like Western Russia, possibly Eastern Europe, but that seems to be its stronghold. I don't think there's any evidence for it roaming into Alaska or the Yukon, so crossing the Bering Land Bridge from Russia. There were a few other different species of cheetahs. There was another species that reached, it might have been Echinonyx pedensis, reaching between like 150 to 210 pounds, or somewhere around maybe 70 to 100 kilograms. However, it was hunting smaller prey compared to Pleistogensis and also would have had trouble with competition from other predators, even this specific species. So, um, yeah, this is one of the issues that even the Eurasian cave lion, especially a lioness by herself, would have had a lot of problems with. She definitely couldn't fight probably two of them at once. Be hard enough maybe with just a single one, especially if it's a male. Yeah, that's not a bad reconstruction. It is interesting how often they are or the different species of predators are utilizing caves during the Pleistocene. So they then use these data to determine the sex of the mammoth specimen. So this is coming from the 98 bone, tooth, and tusk samples of the different mammoths coming in from Siberia. We were very surprised because there was no reason to expect a sex bias in the fossil record, said first author Dr. Patricia Peknerova, also from the Swedish Museum of Natural History. Since the ratio of females to males was likely balanced at birth, we had to consider explanations that involved better preservation of male remains. The findings suggest that woolly mammoths live similarly to modern elephants, with herds of females and young elephants led by an experienced adult female. That could possibly be the case. I would say though, I think it would still be quite challenging for even females to test whether or not in a frozen lake could withstand their weight, considering you can have it where certain part of the lake can hold their weight, but not the other. Um, but yeah, I still think the males were probably just less. It is possible they were less concerned. Without the benefit of living in a herd led by an experienced female, Male mammoths may have had a higher risk of dying in natural traps such as bogs, crevasses, and lakes. Though it does seem to be like, especially with those specific bulls that will cross those certain rivers over in Zimbabwe and Zambia, that they just decide they want to head across, and the females will take a much longer route around, so they, as well, especially their own youngsters, will not get pulled into the current. Um, Trying to think of what else specifically. Trying to think of what other traps. Actually, I guess let's bring up specifically Smilodon fatalis. Yeah, Smilodon and space FA. Okay.
Okay, I think I pulled this as funny.
Well, that's different. That's definitely a different look. Also, with the cub, it almost looks like a bear cub to an extent. But yeah, that's an interesting appearance. I mean, it could represent like a certain Smilodon population over in Arizona or maybe even some part of Utah. This would be an instance over in the La Brea tar pits of California. So over in Los Angeles, so you would have had different Colombian mammoth individuals, even American mastodon, short-faced bears inhabit the region. Oh yeah, like speaking of the short-faced bears, it is a bit of a question as to why they had those stunted snouts. Now, there is another species of bear. Actually, there's two. There are two species of bears today that have a somewhat sort of short face. I'd say the panda is a little less so, and it's not a member of the short-faced bear lineage, but it's very distantly related to pretty much all of the other ursids, meaning members of the bear family, Ursidae, compared to the short-faced bear, or well, specifically the spectacled bear, which is a modern short-faced bear. Um, Also, yeah, Smilodon would have been a contemporary for the Arctodocimus, or the larger short-faced bear of North America. And you might have had instances where Smilodon might have tried to hunt the bear occasionally, or at least if they were acting as a group, I would say it would be quite hard. I mean, this isn't like necessarily a pack of wolves, which are not really jumping on the animal, whereas a Smilodon could and grapple the bear to the ground, and it has much larger forearm muscles compared to its body size than the bear does. So the bear could still, take down the Smilodon. It's much larger. But, Arctodus simus, it's a bit of a question. It does look like it probably weighed about 1,300 pounds, or a little over 600 kilograms. There were certain previous estimates that the animal could weigh well over like 2,200 to 3,000 pounds, or pushing well over maybe 1,000 to 1,300 kilograms. But, Smilodon fatalis was also close to the size of the Eurasian cave lion, probably pushing around 5 to 600 pounds, or a little over 250 to maybe 280 kilograms, yet had much larger forearms. Like, it had pretty much the largest forearm muscles compared to its body size of any species of cat. Smilodon populator might have been larger, but it seems to be that, Smilodon fatalis in many instances was coming into contact with larger herbivores than Populator was. It's not necessarily that the herbivores over in South America, which is where Populator was restricted to, also the descendant of Smilodon fatalis, were small. It was just that you had Colombian mammoths over in North America, and really just different species of mastodons, certain giant ground sloths inhabiting South America, which could still, at least with the mastodons, weigh from around 9 to 10 tons, and the ground sloths in some instances around maybe 5 to 6 tons, like with Megatherium, certain southern Aratherium populations. but Smilodon fatalis is probably feeding on also different species of camels. It could have come into contact with southern woolly mammoth populations. We just so far don't really have any evidence for that. We do now know that it was over in Alberta at some point. In fact, later into the Ice Age, I believe it was probably somewhere around 70 to 80,000 years ago that that occurred. Oh, this is a funny picture. I don't know what he's like. His intention is at that moment. It's almost like he's looking at a certain reflection. And yeah, it doesn't seem like he's hunting. He seems quite cheerful. Oh yeah, also it seems to be that Smilodon was probably roaming a certain open woodlands or different grasslands, very different from what you would see in like Africa of today or even different parts of the Great Plains. The vegetation that also the Columbian mammoths, the American mastodons, and also in different parts of Canada, Alaska, over in Europe and Asia, like in the mammoth steppe, the grasses had much higher levels of minerals, nutrients, and certain chemical compounds that would have helped create the massive sizes of these different species of mammoths. In some cases, they were probably containing certain nutrients that would have helped put on the massive fat layers that woolly mammoths consisted of, and even of the steppe mammoth populations. The southern mammoths and the Columbian mammoths were probably feeding on slightly less nutrient dense grasses.
This is Californicus?
Californicus. It's either a subspecies or it's
Smilodon californicus.
that's interesting. I haven't heard of that type of species. Just Gracilis, populator, and Fatalis. I have heard Californicus used for other mammals, like Ice Age mammals. I wonder if that's referring to another genus. Is this Macaridus? Because that chin looks awfully similar to Macaridus, except the canines seem a bit long. There's another species, but Smilodon does not have this long of a chin. None of the Smilodon species in general do. It might be a bit closer to Homotherium.
Okay, Smilodon californis and Smilodon fatalis are the same animal.
Okay. Oh, might have heard of that before. I wonder if that was an older description, like a certain paleontologist described Smilodon as being that species. For some reason, they changed it.
Yeah, it's the fatalis, which is valid, accepted the scientific name for the widespread North Central American. Okay,
Hmm.
so it is fatalis.
Okay. Um, we're going to take a 2-minute break. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Let's see. I guess let's head back to the mammoth, see if there's anything else. Let's see. I think that was it. Okay. Let's actually bring up ground sloth, Megatherium specifically. It's been a while. Megath. Yeah, it is very possible that Smilodon populator, but you could have had even Smilodon fatalis over in North America, well, and South America. Smilodon fatalis has been found in different parts of Peru, Brazil, Uruguay, possibly even Colombia, definitely Panama. So it thrived throughout much of the Western Hemisphere. Homotherium was further north into Alaska and the Yukon. Oh, yeah, this is a really good reconstruction, probably adjacent to maybe some part of the Andes mountain ranges over in Peru or Argentina. Okay, this is probably like Paraguay, over in South America. Basically, it's based off of Walking with Beasts. Oh yes, it's the reconstruction for the Megatherium Walking with Beasts is pretty good. If anything, maybe the claws are actually a little short, except when you see them up close. I think with the animatronic, and then it looks much more realistic. But, it seems to be that for the most part, they're herbivores. There seems to be possibly some evidence for Megatherium being occasionally an omnivore, but really just scavenging from carcasses. Possibly not going after any animals, considering they were incredibly slow. It's not that you could have had certain oblivious herbivores and then it just snuck up on it, but it might have been quite challenging. Oh yeah, those instances where it likely had a long tongue is suited for grasping branches similar to modern day giraffes, especially when you're looking at okapis, but all species of giraffes have tongues especially equipped for grappling thorny species or thorny branches from like different species of acacia trees. Sloths probably didn't have that type of a tongue mechanism. We'll say that the sloth on the bottom looks a bit like a bear and a sloth, but the one on top looks much more realistic. They also walked on the sides of their feet. This seems to be a Tamarundi, or a species of tree anteater of today. Though there were small species of ground sloths during the Ice Age. They were even smaller than today's tree sloths over in modern day South America, maybe pushing around 4 pounds in some instances. They were quite small, like barely 2 kilograms. Oh, yeah. I don't know if this is Charles R. Knights or another paleo artist. It's definitely an older reconstruction of a ground sloth, and he definitely has very enhanced toe claws. It is quite astounding how they were able to keep a decent distance, at least like within the toe claw lengths of each other, at least preventing their feet from getting entangled with each other. So, efficient walking for the animal. It doesn't seem to have had the ability to run, simply was having very short, like almost non existent ankle bones. When you look at the ankle and shin and toe bones of Megatherium or Aramatherium, even, they were barely existent. So, likely just at a simple walking pace, but probably very quick when it came to standing up and coming into contact with, let's say, a predator or another giant ground sloth during the breeding season.
Okay, this is
And
funny.
fights might have been quite violent. Yeah, I've seen these. They're creepy, like just very, almost orangutan like arms. Because orangutans, like they are strong. There's not really a lot of profound muscle in their arms. However, they have the ability to just hang on to a branch for an extended period of time. But this might have not been the instance with sloths. I think he seems to be just trying to grab the only tree around. This might have been from a certain movie or it's a certain model. If it is a movie, I don't know precisely what it is. However, it's a good model, even by today's standards. It's also giving it like a more naked sort of a look, or at least furless, which is very likely considering it was quite warm over in much of Ice Age South America. Obviously, as you would hit the higher mountain ranges of Peru, Argentina, it would become much colder, and the Megatherium might be hanging out with like the Viscachas at certain points. But likely there wasn't enough food in those regions. So there were many forced ecosystems, somewhat similar to today's. However, the plant life was probably much higher nutrients, kind of like with what you see in the Mammoth Steppe. Yeah, it wasn't actually a bad reconstruction. Yeah, it's a good skull with Smilodon. Well, I guess let's head forward in time, but still technically looking at a relic of the Ice Age. So, from the dailyinterlake.com, state overestimated wolf population for decades, according to annual wolf report. I wonder who this was. So here seems like we have a gray wolf in some part of, I'm guessing, the Western Canada or the Western United States. Probably not Alaska, looking at the forest background. So it's a gray wolf walks through the woods in Glacier National Park. So that's Western Montana. Up the North Fork in this file photo, a new pack of wolves has been discovered on Apgar Mountain and may be the culprit in pet deaths across the river. Well, that's a bit unfortunate. Well, let's see what's occurring. There are hundreds of fewer wolves in Montana than previously thought. Whoa. That's that is not a small decrease. According to the 2025 wolf report released by Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks earlier this month, about 725 wolves currently inhabit the state per an updated version of the model that the state uses to estimate populations. I mean, that might actually make sense considering last time I checked, there were around 155 wolf packs over in Montana, which is immense. Most of them inhabiting the western part of the state. Some entering like the central southern region of Montana. So probably for the most part, feeding on or focusing or targeting different not wolf, mule deer and elk populations. I still believe there are around 5,000 moose over in Montana, so occasionally hunting them as well. About this that is far fewer than the 1,094 wolves that the state estimated using the previous version model. So there's obviously going to be fewer packs. Likely a number just that don't exist. Similar discrepancies are seen throughout the past 2 decades. Biologists have long assumed the state's wolf population hovered around 1,200 animals. But when the state wildlife agency backtracked, using the updated model, it found that the number of wolves over the past 15 years likely vacillated between 800 and 1,000 animals.
Is that a werewolf?
Where?
Where?
Oh, yeah. Seems that way.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's an advertisement.
Probably was. State biologists use the updated model to conclude that about 450 wolves currently inhabit northwest Montana. That's definitely not a small amount. That's just the northwestern part of the state. It's not just the whole continuous western middle Rockies front. Previous estimates placed the regional population around 550 canids. Whoa! Just in northwest Montana? The new counts also, that's a lot, revealed what the state wildlife agency described as a steady decline in wolf numbers from 2021. If average harvest rates continue, the statewide population could fall below the 450 wolf minimum threshold set by the Montana Wolf Management Plan within the next 3 years. Oh, yeah, I forgot. You can hunt them there. So, according to the report, the revelations about Montana's wolf population spurred the state wildlife agency to suggest a wolf harvest quota of only 250 animals for the 2026 to 2027 hunting season. I don't know how it works with the effects of hunting on wolves, but it can't be too great on family dynamics. Last year, the state set a quota of 450 wolves. Hunters and trappers ultimately harvested 247 of the canids from across the state. Another 47 animals were legally killed in response to depredation. Well, this can explain the somewhat drop or immense drop. The updated model has yet to be peer reviewed, but Chief of Conservation Policy Quentin Kuhala, I feel like I'm reading a Oviraptor name, upheld the accuracy of the new population estimates in a July 17th press release from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. We're confident in the updated model and see it as an advancement in science and modeling. The state system for modeling wolf populations came under sharp scrutiny last year when several conservation and animal rights groups added new claims to an existing lawsuit and asked the court to halt the 2025 to 2026 harvest quota from taking effect. Part of the group's argument was the assertion that the state wildlife biologists had routinely overestimated how many wolves were on the landscape. I'm just surprised that they didn't mention about like anything to do with like wolf really like family dynamics and that how it occurs with them, but or how it affects them. Um, yeah, but anyway, besides that, let's see what else is going on. I think also over in Montana, you have at least 30 different elk herds within the state. Many of them also are certain herds inhabiting like the Missouri River breaks region, which is basically the end of the northern limit of the Missouri. So while Lewis and Clark District Court Judge Christopher Abbott ultimately denied the group's petition for a restraining order, he wrote in his opinion that the plaintiffs raised serious questions on the merits of the model's accuracy, whether it is sufficiently reliable to ensure wolf populations are adequately protected. There's also the Lewis and Clark National Forest over in I think central western Montana. Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks finally admitted what we've been saying for years. States wolf counts were wrong, and they've been misleading the public. Wild Earth Guardians attorney Lizzie Pennock said in a July 18th press release issued by the plaintiffs in the court case. Ugh. I will say, though, these constant things with wolves and grizzly bears over in this part of the country, like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, continue. But this seems to be a bit different. So the report also included data on wolf depredation from the United States Department of Agriculture and Wildlife Services Division. In 2025, the division responded to 82 complaints of wolf depredations in Montana. Further investigation concluded that 22 of the incidents were unrelated to wolves. Oh, that's a decrease. Yeah, there's definitely those incidents going on with wolves attacking a lot of livestock over in California. I'm guessing that's due to the lack of deer in the area. There's also not many elk. There's like small populations of reintroduced tool elk in Northern California, also in the coastal regions. I think coming in maybe from Oregon, like that's where they got the populations from, considering there are literally populations of elk along the beach of certain parts of Oregon. They also inhabit like the forested and grassland areas in the region, but they'll also hang out on the shore. But yeah, I think it's a problem over in California is too little deer, and they are also having to compete with cougars, coyotes, even black bears in many instances. People. So, yeah, over here in Montana, I mean, still occurs, but I also wonder if it's due to a lack of prey items. Because this isn't a small area that we're looking at. I mean, first, it just mentioned that the picture was in Glacier National Park, but it looks like we're looking at like the Lewis and Clark National Forest, but it's in Northwest. I swear Lewis and Clark is further south, like a bit closer to the greater Yellowstone ecosystem or Yellowstone National Park itself. So the division ultimately determined that about 90 domestic animals were confirmed killed or probably killed by wolves, including 59 cattle, 20 sheep, and 9 livestock dogs. Oh, whoa. Well, we threw the dogs onto there. That's definitely added a lot more of a wholesome loss. Did I say that right? Not sure. I think I meant to just say like something about it, like to the point of emotional. The Montana Livestock Loss Board issued $92,917 last year in reimbursements for wolf depredation, about half the amount the board issued in payments for deaths attributed to grizzly bears. Wow. Well, there's not even equality when it comes to the grizzly bear and wolf reimbursements. That's interesting. Um, hmm. The Montana Fish and Wildlife Commission will vote on regulations for the 2026 and to 2027 wolf hunting and trapping season, including the proposed quota on August 19th. Public comments are being accepted through August 12th and may be submitted online at such and such. Okay, well, this was odd. I swear there was something with the wolves that occurred recently that we were looking at. I'm not sure. I think it was over in Canada. I think specifically part of Alberta and British Columbia with taking out hundreds of wolves to help restore the small woodland caribou population over in that part of the country where you have the much larger populations further north in British Columbia, part of the Yukon, possibly part of Alberta. I think it's mostly concentrated in northern British Columbia, however, just to help uplift that population. And yeah, it's just kind of unfortunate what's going on here. Though, yeah, it is unfortunate also for the livestock losses, but uh, besides that, I'm not sure what else I could say. I just found it funny that it mentioned that their the reimbursement was supposedly half. The question is, how many grizzly bear livestock attacks were there per se in Montana? Because there are more brown bears over in Montana than compared to Wyoming. I think, at least with the Wyoming, I think population, the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, it's kind of halted. But I swear, like in Montana, it's somewhere around maybe 15 to 1,800 grizzly bears, and they're also slowly moving further east, so headed towards, like, central and eastern Montana. So, quite strange. Well, um, we're going to give everyone a minute to put in any comments into the chat. Oh, thanks for joining, and from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Happy International Diprotodon Day, or the giant wombats. And remember that nothing is better than animals all the time.